and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Fence, brought to you in association with BoyleSports. And boy oh boy, do we have a big weekend of racing to dissect. As always, I'm obviously joined by Barry Geraghty and Tony Keenan. But before we go any further, please hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. Get involved, give us a like, give us a retweet, whatever you like, but we want you to get in contact with us as well, so please do that in the comments box below. We read them all and we like your feedback, so do get involved. Hit subscribe, but now we can crack straight on because, as I say, joined by Barry and Tony as always, and yeah, plenty to get stuck into in this show. It's going to be fast paced. Barry, are you ready for it?
I hope so, Vanessa. I hope you're okay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the one that sounds like I might not be, but trust me, I'm fine. I'm sharp in my mind, just not in my voice. Tony, you were both of you were at Leopardstown this weekend, but Tony, you went yesterday on Sunday. Did you enjoy your weekend of racing?
Yeah, what a thrilling weekend. It was the beautiful chaos of the sport, wasn't it? More so probably than any weekend so far this season, and I think that chaos looks like it's going to be well reflected into Cheltenham 5 weeks' time.
Well, yeah, the chaos in parts, I like that word. Yeah, that was very much the case. Let's kick straight off with the What Happened Where section, which of course is looking straight into Leopardstown. We're going to kick off with the big two races, the Gold Cup followed by the Irish Champion Hurdle. But the Gold Cup first and foremost, the Irish Gold Cup, Galopin Des Champs winning in the style of which many people hoped he would. And I suppose the big question, Barry, to start with is going into this race and coming into this season as a Gold Cup hope, many people were worried about his stamina. Did he answer stamina doubts this weekend?
I don't think his stamina got really tested. He could do no more than he did. He obviously was brilliant in every part of the race. He was like poetry, jumped, travelled, settled. Paul brought him a really lovely time challenge and only got stuck into him in probably the last 150 yards, and he pulled away. He hit the line strong. He galloped away for 300, 400 yards afterwards, so he was still full of running. But the race itself wasn't at an end-to-end gallop, so you couldn't just say for certain, oh, this is going to get a Gold Cup trip on that. But there's no reason to suggest he won't get it either, so you'd have to be very happy with it. Really classy performance and pretty much faultless.
Pretty much faultless. Okay, well, he is 11-8 with BoyleSports at the top of the market for the Gold Cup. A Plus Tard 11-2, and Statler, who ran a pretty decent race as well in behind, at 6s now. Brave Man's Game, the best of the English, at 7-1. Noble Yates 7-1, Ahoy Senor, etc. Tony, I guess for me the question that I'm wondering now is the gap in the market between Galopin Des Champs and A Plus Tard at 11-8 versus 11-2. Do you think that's a fair representative of how far away they are in each other's sort of ability and profile going into the Gold Cup now?
I think he's a little bit short. I think he has more potential than any of them. There's every possibility he may be even better over 3 miles 2 in March, but as Barry mentioned, we just don't know off the back of this. He did everything right. He travelled, he jumped. I think Willie Mullins has done an excellent job. He seems to have changed the horse's whole demeanour from where he was as a novice chaser. He's very settled and is doing everything right. But this race was very steadily run. I think from the third last, they were 3 seconds quicker than the horses in the Arkle, which they shouldn't really be. Now, the Arkle, it was a little bit of a pace collapse, and you had a marathon soft ground chaser, the Big Dog, and Fury Road, who is not just not up to that level, still cruising 2 out. So I think that told you all you need to know about the pace of the race. That type of pace is not going to be any good to Statler, who stays a bit further, and I don't particularly think he wants to be ridden forward in his races either. So they probably had to try something else when they knew that the pace was going to be steady on Saturday. So yeah, Galopin Des Champs, he hasn't really answered that stamina question yet. What you have in slowly run races is that lesser horses finish closer to very good horses. The odd time you do get a slowly run Gold Cup. Alboom Photos second Gold Cup would have been very slowly run. Like, I think Real Steel was 6th or 7th and that, beaten 7 or 8 lengths, and you know, he was never anywhere near that level, and he never really stayed that trip in a properly run race. So it can happen, but it would be unusual. I think there was a time when horses like Galopin Des Champs, these horses stepping up and trip, were a bit of value in the Gold Cup market. They were underestimated. Like the time Size and John stepped up. Even the first year Plus Tard tried the Gold Cup trip. I think he was 8 or 9 to 1 after he'd won the race at Christmas, the 3 mile race, and that was a properly run race. But Galopin Des Champs just seems a little bit skinny. He'd be coming up against far better horses than he came up against on Saturday in the Gold Cup, and a few with maybe not quite as much potential, but plenty of potential. So, wouldn't be one bit surprised if he produced better over the trip, but at the prices I'd probably be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, fascinating contest when, as you say, he's that short at the top of the market, yet so many in behind. You can definitely make cases for. Tony, let's stick with you for the Irish champion hurdle reflections. Obviously, Stateman putting in a pretty faultless performance, I think it's fair to say, beating Honeysuckle, who seemed to run to a decent level for her, and Vauban obviously 2 in behind. Stateman now 11 to 4 off the back of that run for the champion hurdle come March. Do you believe that was a step forward on what we've seen of him previously? Has he taken another progressive step?
Well, he probably has. Vauban didn't really come forward as expected from his seasonal return at Christmas. His hurdling does seem to be an issue. It was patchy as a juvenile, and he could probably get away with it because he had such an ability edge, but he's not been able to get away with it this season. He's quite free going. I think Willie Mullins mentioned he got buzzed up in the prelims as well. But Stateman is just the ultimate professional racehorse. His hurdling is much improved. A little bit of a sideways jump at the first, but he got much slicker as the race went on. Very, very quick. 2 out. Is he going to be Constitution Hill? Probably not, but he's the mother and father of each way bets, for putting in multiples and things like that at 11 to 4, 3 to 1, anti-post, non-runner, no bet, because it's going to take an act of God probably to knock him out of the 3, and there probably won't be a whole pile of runners now with Honeysuckle. I think it's Mayor's Hurdle or nothing with her at the minute, listening to the trainer and the owner, but I think Barry's going to maybe have a go at covering her rather than me.
Okay, well, over to you then, Barry. In regards to Honeysuckle, what do you think her future is at this stage now?
Well, I think they're making the right call for the Mayor's Hurdle, and after the Hatton's Grace, I was all for staying on the Champion Hurdle route, but no, I felt she ran well in the Hatton's Grace and didn't lose much in defeat. In Leopardstown, she just struggled for me to lie with that pace. She just doesn't have the cruising speed that she has. She's just lost that little bit of an edge. She didn't jump as well for that reason then, and she looked as if she was going to get swallowed up turning in. But when Rachel actually got stuck into her fully, she rallied well and she finished strongly. She stayed all the way, but for me, she's crying out for further. There's no reason to say she will beat Stateman or get anywhere near him in the Champion Hurdle, and likewise you'd have to say something similar about Constitution Hill. So no, I think they're making the right choice. If they're going to go on with her, the Mayor's Hurdle is the way to go.
And quick reflection from you on Vauban, because I know that you were quite hopeful that after we last saw Vauban, he might take quite a significant step forward, but would you be questioning whether he did or not, like Tony has just done?
Yeah, no, as Tony put it, we were expecting a bigger step forward from him, and it didn't come. He'd every chance to run better. His jumping is a little bit hit and miss, but like that as well, he's not just finding life as easy as we thought he would going forward from his season last season. So he just hasn't progressed as an individual for whatever reason. He was obviously delayed in his comeback, which might also be a reflection that things just haven't been going smoothly for him at home. So for whatever reason, he just hasn't progressed, and I think that puts us jumping under pressure. But no, I was expecting a bigger step forward from Christmas than he showed.
So the Tuesday in March, Champion Hurdle, what we'll see is Stateman making the running like he did in Ireland, and they'll come swinging into the bottom of the hill, and Constitution Hill will just be cruising, waiting to make his move, and Stateman will slowly start to be flat to the boards essentially, and then Constitution Hill will just fly past him, ping the last, won't he, Barry, and then away and gone, win by 20 lengths. It's going to be great. I'm so excited. I've manifested it already. You see what I've done there? I've just predicted how this is going to go. And you viewers can do the same. Get involved. We want to hear from you. So tell us how you think the Champion Hurdle is going to play out, how you think the Gold Cup's going to play out off the back of what we've just said. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Please let us know. Comments box below. Let's carry straight on. Please, Tony, we're straight back to you and rewinding to the start of Saturday. Seems like a long time ago now, as you can tell by my voice, but we did see Goodland win in pretty decent fashion. Is now 11 to 4 off the back of that for the Ballymore. We know you were very keen on this horse going into the Dublin Racing Festival. I suppose he's done nothing to put you off at this stage.
Yes, I'd still be keen on him. Very little covered the first 5 home here, but I do think Goodland was better than the form. The other two horses that raced up at the pace, We've All Been Caught and Quai de Paris, both finished last and second last. Now I don't think the English horse ran anywhere near form, but even so, I think it was a good effort out of Goodland to keep up the gallop, pressing the pace throughout. I think he was just the wrong side of Keane through the early part of the race, and I was worried about him lasting home, but he did. His jumping was excellent for a horse who fell or unseated early on. I think in his first run of a hurdle, he actually seems to be an excellent jumper. He does things right in his races. I think he's going to be slightly better going down in trip. He definitely, his trainer mentioned afterwards the possibility that he could be a supreme horse. Now, I don't agree with him for a second on that, but he's definitely not an Albert Bartlett horse. All along looks like a horse for the Ballymore. Now, there's no horse that has really put themselves head and shoulders above anything else in that division. It's quite open, and I think he's got as good a chance as any. He likes decent ground, he does things right in his races. He's won a grade 1 on his second start. Now, it wasn't the strongest grade 1 because it was basically maiden hurdlers and horses that had been beaten already at graded level, but to me that's as much potential as anything else that there is in the race, and I would like him a lot for that race actually. And I would have a bit of time also for the second, Absolute Notions, who looked much improved for stepping up and trip. He couldn't go with them kind of down the back straight. He was finding it hard to lay up, but finished out very strongly. And there would be a possibility of doing a related form multiple with the two of those, Goodland in the Ballymore into this lad in the Albert Bartlett, because it looks like they're going to go their separate ways at Cheltenham.
Oh, so we're rating the race pretty highly then on this show. Barry, would you concur with those thoughts?
I would, yeah. No, the winner you'd have to be very impressed with. A little bit keen early, but that's never a bad thing either when you're talking about. It's a good sign of a quality horse, a bit of class. It's nice to have a handful and get him settled. Michael O'Sullivan did brilliantly on him to get him relaxed. Very professional, the ride he gave him, but likewise the horse was very professional too. Also his manner, or his, he's a very relaxed horse as well. Obviously by Blue Brazil, like Constitution Hill, seems to have a similar mind. Very easy going horse, albeit he was keen early in the preliminaries, and afterwards you could see him very calm, relaxed. So those things will stand to him. But Tony, as Tony mentioned, Absolute Notions was a horse I was flagging up for the Albert Bartlett after this. He was ridden prominently in his previous starts where he had some good form and good runs. Where Davy, albeit he popped out handy, he was happy just to let him slot in and bide his time, let the horse find his own feet, and he finished strongly and stayed all the way to the line. He was the only one making any threat on Goodland, and there was some smart performers behind him. So I thought stepping up on trip and riding him the way they rode him at the weekend, I thought he was a live contender for the Albert Bartlett.
Okay, so 2 positive nods for Absolute Notion. He's currently 10-1 with BoyleSports for the Albert Bartlett, and the boys taking a positive view on him at this stage. Let's move on to the juveniles. Galopin defeats Lossiemouth in somewhat controversial circumstances. Tony, will come to you first on this one. Lossiemouth now 6-4 at the top of the market for the Triumph Hurdle, despite the defeat. Lots of excuses being made for her. What was your reading of the race, I guess?
Yeah, well, nothing happened for the first 3 quarters of the race, and then everything happened. I suppose this horse that came back through the field that Jack Foley was riding, I don't think it was a massive surprise that horse came back through the field. That horse, it emptied completely on its initial start at Leopardstown over Christmas, I think it was, and it just did the same here. So maybe sending that horse to the front and expecting it not to come back on top of them was wrong probably, but really that was only the start of Lossiemouth's problems, because she came back through the field, lost 3 or 4 lengths, then she got forced wide, probably had to make a move sooner than ideal, then got in at the butt of the second last, which wasn't ideal, then took a bump of ascending turning in, so it all went wrong from there with her. Paul Townend, Willie Mullins was criticising Paul Townend for trying to win the race after that. I just think that's completely wrong. There's plenty of horses have stopped from the last hurdle home at Leopardstown. Garlam or so didn't stop in this case, but Paul Townend was well entitled to try and ride and win the race. And look, I'm sure his blood was up at that point. He'd made his move. There probably wasn't much. The red mist had descended, and he was all out to try and win the race. He didn't give her a hard time the last 100 yards or anything like that. So the fact that we're having a hard race, I wouldn't buy that at all for a second. They were actually quickening up late rather than stopping. So hard race, I don't think so. I would give a bit of credit to the winner. The winner did plenty wrong in the early part of the race. Very keen, and stepping up and trip, new course at Cheltenham might suit that horse more than Lossiemouth. I'm not sure Lossiemouth was really closing in the last furlong. The Triumph is going to take, I'm just looking at the times there, I think it's going to take another 15 or 16 seconds longer than the Spring would usually take. So it wouldn't be the greatest surprise if the winner was at least have a chance of upholding that from. Though I was interested in Barry's take. Like Paul Townend got a bit of grief for this. Jack Foley got a bit of grief for falling back through the field. Like what is the kind of etiquette for pacemakers coming back on top of your own horse? Like, is there supposed to be a shout, or was it just one of those things?
Yeah, well, I'd agree with a lot of Tony said on the debrief on the race, if you like, but on that incident itself, so Joe DeFette at the fourth last was untidy and Lossiemouth landed up on top of her there, and then obviously at the third last where the incident happened. But at the same token, Danny Mullins is on Jack Foley's outside, and he's riding his own race, and he hasn't given Jack any option. So by Jack having no option, Paul had no option, and Paul got shuffled back. I thought Paul did really well to creep back into contention, because if you're going to make ground at that point of the race, you need to do it slowly and steady and consistently. It's small bites. Get yourself back into position, but you don't want to do it rapidly or you burn your horse out. So I thought Paul did really well. He didn't give her an overly tough time. He gave her every chance to win her race. He gave her 3 gentle smacks after the last, and wasn't going to catch the winner. So I thought he did well. I would be slow to criticise him for it. Unfortunately, what happened, and all those other incidents, as Tony mentioned, missed the second last, ascending, pushed him wide, or her wide. But as regards the winner, she obviously got the run of the race, and was great to see her win for her own connections. But to take that one to Cheltenham, being as keen as she was early on, and you take in the preliminaries and the whole buzz and excitement, I'd fear that one could just cart off in Cheltenham. So I wouldn't be so keen on the winner for the festival. I'd still like Lossiemouth, but I do have a little fancy for Blood Destiny as well.
Yeah, as you've been banging on about all season, Barry. Don't worry, we're aboard.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Sorry, that sounded somewhat derogatory. I didn't mean that. I meant that in a very positive way. We're all aboard Blood Destiny, currently 3-1, but it was a much bigger price when Barry started banging on. On we go to El Fabiolo in the Arkle, the Irish Arkle team. Tony, we'll kick off with you here. I want to know, in terms of, this was one of the most fascinating races going into the Dublin Racing Festival to look at, in terms of all those Mullins horses running against each other, who's going to step up in trip, who's going to relish the 2 miles at this stage in their career. Do you think the race answered all the questions when you look back on it now?
I think it did. When you get a properly run race like this, it does tend to answer a lot of questions and give you a good stance on where the respective horses were. The horses from the Christmas Grade 1, St. Ra, Visionarian and Field Door, they were beaten after 4 fences, as the other ones just went clear. That told you plenty. Flame Bearers jumping just didn't stand up. Banbridge ran okay. I just didn't like the way he was left behind from 3 out. You'd be thinking maybe Torners, but I just wonder, has he got the ability? He didn't have the ability over hurdles to be a Grade 1 horse. Very likeable horse, does things right, jumps well. I'm just wondering, has he got the raw ability to cope with a race like that? I thought Appreciated got found out. I thought he was the one that had things go right in the race. He jumped well. He had a good track position. He didn't race too close to the pace, which was probably a bit strong, that was set by Dicer Dynamo, and he just wasn't good enough. You could possibly argue he had 3 races in a short space of time. That'd be fair. Maybe the ground was a bit quick for him, but Willie Mullins prepping him for the Dublin Racing Festival, you'd expect if he was good enough, he would go and win. He's a 9-year-old novice, which would raise another little bit of a red flag, because he obviously has had a few problems along the way. To only be starting out chasing at this stage. But I thought the winner was absolutely deadly. I had a few quid on him for the Arkle today. His jumping would give you a little bit of a worry. He adjusted right here and there, but he's the kind of horse that he'd make a mistake and then he'd jump brilliantly at the next. It was actually the same at Fairyhouse on debut. He made that mistake 4 out and was just able to overcome it quickly and back, going well, jumped 3 out, brilliant. He got stuck down the inner for a lot of the race, which I'm not sure that was the place to be. Paul Townend, who tends to be one of the best jockeys that's sort of using these bias in his favour, wanted to be on the outside, and basically Everton he rode all weekend, and he's just absolutely powered away from them from the last. He's going to be mixing it again with John Bond. Like, that piece of form from me, he just looks the standout piece of form in this race. and there's every chance he'll reverse that form. There were bits of bother for him in the race. He wasn't great the last time. He had a bit of trouble there in the straight, but more so than that, I think it was preparation going into it. He hadn't run since Tramore. Missed the Dublin Racing Festival with a small bit of setback. Hadn't run at Cheltenham. It was only his second start of a hurdle. So I think himself and John Bunn should be a little bit closer together in the betting. Hopefully, well, not hopefully that the two of them get there. Because now I've backed the Fabiolo. Maybe John Bunn will blot his copybook now at the weekend and throw in a mistake or two. There hasn't been much. There hasn't been much to any evidence of him doing that so far. But I think it'd be a fantastic race if the two of them get there. And I suppose if a few of them had finished in a line on Saturday, they would all be keen to go. Like last year, I think Houghton Colour and St Sam and Riviere de Tel and Blue Lord all finished up pitching up, but Fabiolo now might be after saying, well, Dysart Dynamo I'm sure will certainly go if all is fine. The only issue with him is when he did get a hard race at Cheltenham last season, he kind of regressed off the back of it. He had a hard race here as well. I just wonder what will he do off the back of this as well.
Okay, but basically very positive about the winner, and the winner is currently 2-1 El Fabiolo, second best in the market behind the aforementioned John Bond, who's currently 10-11. Appreciate it, and Sir Gard, Dysart Dynamo, all bigger prices after that. So it really is about the front two, and as Tony said, hopefully we'll see John Bond at the weekend at Warwick as well. But Barry, your take on this race. Are you as keen on El Fabiolo as Tony is?
Oh, very much so. I thought going into this was the race of the season to date, and I thought the same afterwards. It was brilliant. El Fabiolo was the only horse who could travel at the speed that Dysart Dynamo was setting. Everything else was struggling, as Tony mentioned. Phil Dore, Sunray, Visionarian, three grade one performers at Christmas, and they're out the back early on. I thought Appreciated travelled reasonably well, and for me he sat closer to the pace than Banbridge did. Banbridge stayed on for the two of them to finish alongside in the death. I've always felt Appreciated would be better stepping up and trip. I think if it was just a race a little bit more conservatively, the 2.5, the Turners, would be ideal for him. Obviously he'd be clashed with Mighty Potter there, and that to me would be a good clash. Likewise Banbridge up and trip as well. I think that's going to suit him, or he would even possibly would he go further, because I think he would stay all day. But no, it was a brilliant race. The winner missed the fourth last badly, but survived it. Obviously we'll learn from that. Jumped better most of the way through the race than he did at Fairy House, as Tony mentioned, a little bit to his right. He still has a good bit to learn, but it's just all a class. As regards Jan Bond, we'll mention him later on maybe, but his jumping has been unbelievably accurate to date. That's probably the slight head start he has on El Fabiolo, but El Fabiolo is a very classy performer and possibly has more potential for improvement from last season to this one. So the two of those shaping up in the Arkle, I think that's going to be a brilliant clash.
And you mentioned there Banbridge, a lot of people latching on to Banbridge for the Turners off the back of the fact that, you know, he ran on so well in that Irish Arkle, given the fact that he was clearly always run off his feet. But then we see that sort of performance we got to see from Mighty Potter, Barry, and that really was a pretty standout chasing performance from a novice. I know he's thought so much of. He beats the Mullins Battalion and he does it in fine style. For me, he's not absolutely foot perfect yet. You know, he can still make a mistake. He still is, I guess, you know, relatively still learning to jump a fence. But there's so much to like about him. And I suppose the overriding thing for me with Mighty Potter is he just screams that he's a class act, just the way in which he moves through his races. And even when he has to work it out at a fence, he has the class to get himself out of trouble.
Oh, definitely, very classy performer. I had the pleasure of riding him as final piece of work on Wednesday, and fell in love with him. I loved him after he'd won it down Ryle, and likewise then when he won the Drinmore. His jumping has been very good, albeit he stumbled at the back of the fourth last and third last slightly in the Drinmore, but they were just out of lack of concentration. His actual jumping and technique was brilliant. He didn't jump just quite as well at the weekend. He was a little bit slow at the second. He missed the second one away from the stands and was untidy at the last and the third last, I think maybe. So he's definitely better than that. And for me, he just looked like a horse who might have just had a little, but it was from carrying me during the week and he was feeling a bit stiff and sore on himself. But he just didn't look as fluent as he has done in the past. When he was meeting fences on a nice stride, he was perfect. But just one or two, when he was getting in a bit tighter, Davy looked for a big one, he stuck in an extra stride. So I thought he won in spite of not jumping his best. But was a very, very impressive winner. And I just think he is a real class act. He's a horse with a massive future.
Massive, big vote of confidence from our very own Barry Geraghty. We like that inside the link as well. Tony, are you viewing him as positively as Barry does? But also, was there any takeaways from that Mullins lot in behind that you'd like to take forward to Cheltenham?
Terrible run from James de Berlia. We've kind of had a bad bet on him now for this race, the Turners. That's borne that docket anyway. I'd say the race, steady pace, decent ground at this trip. Wasn't an awful lot of use to Gaillard de Mini, but I would understand if they would take this as evidence that they need to go for the 3 mile 6 race now that they have Sir Gerhard for the Brown advisory. I don't think that would be a reasonable point of view, but I would echo an awful lot what Barry said. I thought the winner was brilliant. I think going back a 4.5 and trip for the Turners will actually suit him. Actually, he's got an awful lot of speed, this horse. Like you said, Vanessa, it's just the way he powers through his race that is the most impressive part. He just makes the others, who are good horses, look a little bit a grade below. To me, this race as a trial for the Turners, as opposed to what Appreciated and Banbridge did in the Irish Arkle, this was streets ahead. Now I know that's reflecting the market, but he does look he wouldn't be a favourite I'd be looking to oppose now for any reason in that race, and there probably won't be a huge field in it either.
Okay, my spot at 5-4 for the Turners now, and clearly a deserved price as well, given what we've seen of him. Let's move on to Gentleman to Me, winning over the 2 miles, of course, beating stablemate Blue Lord, who disappointed. Gentleman to Me now 7-1 for the Champion Chase. Barry, quick word from you on him. He's so patchy in his form. Can we take this performance literally from him, and can we take it confidently going to the Champion Chase?
I suppose that's the question, really. He was 40 lengths behind Blue Lord at Christmas, and he reverses that then this weekend. Blue Lord, I wouldn't think ran to the same level of form at Christmas, but I'm not fully convinced that was as amazing as we thought. Jacques Persois was, I think, 14 lengths behind him, and he was beaten about 18 lengths by Facu de Rey and Turles on his next start. So it was a good performance with Blue Lord, but I'm not sure we were right to get run away with that one. Gentleman to Me was good. He was good last season when he beat Edward's Son at Aintree. He was backing up on a couple of wins before that in Turles as well. So he had a good level of form last season, possibly better than Blue Lords if you like. He seems more relaxed as well for me is the big thing. He's definitely a horse with a chance in the Champion Chase. The fact that he doesn't have to make the run. He had to make the run last season because he was so keen. This year he can sit handy, take a lead. That's going to be a big help if Editor de Geet is in the Champion Chase. This fella doesn't need to take him on. He can follow him. So that's going to improve his chances. So he's definitely one with a squeak.
With a squeak. Only with a squeak. Let's move on to all things Elete Toms. I can't say this horse's name, it's dreadful, oh my god. But Facile Vega flop, all things Supreme. If one market had the biggest switch up this weekend, it may well be the Supreme market, because now your favourite is Marine Nationale at 9-4. Gaelic Warrior is priced up at 4s, but we might expect to see him over further. Facile Vega all the way out to 5-1 after disappointing. This Supreme situation is very confusing for me, Tony. What did you make of this race, Facile's flop, and Willie's comments afterwards in terms of Paul Townend really getting it with both barrels again in the post-race interview?
Yeah, I think he was wrong in his criticism with the Lossy Mouth raid, but he was probably right in his criticism of the Facile Vega raid. I think sure people have seen a lot of the sectionals and things like that. They went hard over the first 4 hurdles. JJ Slevin just decided he was going to make it a test on high definition, and Paul Townend went with him. And when high definition went and seated at the 4th, there was no way Paul Townend was getting Facile Vega back at that point. The speed was up and there was no slowing him down. I know Willie Mullins mentioned that maybe he could have took a pull, but I don't know. Barry might be better placed to comment on that, but my own experience watching racing is it's just very hard to do that when they've got up to that speed. Now they did go hard to that point, but the real superstar horses just find a way to win. And it's not that he just narrowly lost, he just checked out completely on the turn in. Paul Townend accepted it very quickly. He's the kind of horse I would find very hard to back him now for his next start. He's a bit like it'd be a bit like backing Bob Ollinger now after his Turner's run last year. Now there was no sign really of attitude or anything like that, but it was just such a disappointing run. And then there's going to be people, the market's going to make some excuses for him, things like that. So he'd be one I would find very, very hard to back off the back of that. And Willie Mullins does have a few of these redemption stories, I suppose, going into Cheltenham, that he has to turn around Blue Lord a little bit, and Ergumine a little bit. Lossima, that doesn't really apply because she's run fine, but the three of these now he's going to have to work his magic. And I mentioned, I think it was after an argument, I don't particularly like backing his horses now off that type of profile. When they're coming in with a load of ones in front of their name, absolutely, they so often get the business done. When they're coming in off disappointing runs only 5 or 6 weeks beforehand, I wouldn't be so keen. Now, I do think there's a couple of things. Obviously, every man and his dog now is going to want to run his horse in the Supreme. Fassi Vega was scaring them all off before. Now they're all saying there's blood in the water, let's have a go here. So anyone who's a 2-miler, well, I think we're going to be back to the days of the bookies offering 4 and 5 each way, 6 each way places on this race, because they're all going to want to run. And I'm sure all the other owners with Willie Mullins who have got possible 2-milers who might have been steered maybe to Fairy House, there's a race or two in Naas there beforehand, or on to Punchestown, they'll be saying we want to run too, and they'd probably be right. I also think there's a possibility that we're going to get the Willie Mullins bingo on speed and every other drug under the sun as well, because like he said a press morning there this morning, I wonder about the usefulness of that, because these horses have all ran yesterday and the day before. You can't know how they've recovered from the races yet. Like the obvious thing, they have got obvious lameness or things like that is there, they'll see that, but when he starts pushing a button in a fortnight or 3 weeks again to build them back up to Cheltenham, is there some residual effect? Like Barry mentioned in Perry Pass, are they now going to start thinking, well, maybe we need to go for the Supreme with him, or maybe Gaelic Warrior the same if Facile Vega doesn't come out of this properly, because he has had a hard race along with everything else, and I tend to look at hard races as horses running very fast. So that were my thoughts on him. There's a lot on him there. The winner himself, he's now 5 or 6 to 1 for Supreme or whatever he is. Wouldn't really be a horse I'd like. Didn't really like him beforehand. Does things wrong in his races. Doesn't always jump well. I don't think connections have got him that wrong that he's now kind of going to be deserving of running well in the Supreme. I wouldn't be surprised if he was type of horse went off double figures in the Supreme. Could be way wrong with that, but I do think they've got better horses, and maybe there will be some of the ones that were due to run over further might be switch back into this. But yeah, I think the Supreme has become a much more interesting race off the back of this. But just don't ask me what I think I'd bet or what I think I'll win it. I think it's really tough to know.
No, don't worry, I won't ask you that, Tony, but instead I'll just ask Barry. What would you like to ride in the Supreme, Barry? You can rewind 10 years and come out of retirement and ride one of these horses in the Supreme. Never mind the prices. You've got Marine Nationale, Gaelic Warrior, Tamara's as a bigger price, high definition in there. I mean, you wouldn't be paying me diamonds to ride him over a fence. Rare edition. Facile Vega, obviously 5s. Like, go on, you can have one ride and it's in the Supreme. Who are you riding, please, Barry?
Well, I'd agree with what Tony said. It looks wide open. For me, the horse I just really took a shine to was Imperial Pass, winning the Moscow Flyer and Punchestown. Love the way he jumps, travels, really uncomplicated horse. So I would like him a lot. As regards the race itself at the weekend, Facile Vega, he was dropped in or was ridden with some bit of patience in his bumpers, especially in the champion bumper in Cheltenham, whereas he's ran in 3 hurdle races and he's made the run in all 3. You know, if you want to set up what way you're going to ride a horse tactically, if you're going to start making the running with him, and he's a horse who you can't necessarily dictate it, because as Tony says, when he gets rolling, you're not going to get him back. So it's very hard to put the genie back into the bottle when you've let him loose. So for me, they've missed the boat a little bit on tactics and what they should be doing. Willie mentioned this morning that he will be ridden differently next time, but I wonder will he settle as well as he could have done had he been ridden that way in his earlier start. So he needs to drop in a little bit, switch off. But I think he's a horse who would benefit from soft ground over 2 mile, or else he'd need to step up and trip. But also Willie, he obviously wasn't impressed with a few performances over the weekend. But to me, that relates back to, if you remember when Patrick rode Allaho in the John Durkin, I think it was the last season or the season before, and he gave him a tough race. Willie didn't. It didn't sit well with Willie. It doesn't sit well when these horses get an extra tough race, if you like, or tougher than he would have ideally liked, be that Lossy Mouth or Facile Vega. it doesn't help him in his preparation for Cheltenham. So he's on the back foot with those two. I'd say more so Facile Vega than Lossiemouth, and I would imagine that's where his little bit of frustration might have come from.
Yeah, and that definitely came through in a few TV interviews. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, he can't be. Like this is it. Like he's won the races anyway. Like, he's won everything for the last 10 years. Like I just think he needs to bite his tongue on this kind of stuff. He's annoyed with Paul Town and maybe keep it for home. And I suppose he has basically rode back on his comments today. But Paul Town would be well within his rights and he'd be very annoyed with Willie Mullins throwing him on the whatever Dublin bus he could find round Foxrock yesterday, you know.
Yeah, I suppose, blood is up, high pressure weekend, etc., but it made for a bit of spicy viewing, that is for sure. Let's move on, Barry. Quick mention for Gaelic Warrior, obviously bolted up in the handicap, a horse that you've been very keen on for the Ballymore and is now 4-1 for the Ballymore. Everyone seemed to expect this performance in a handicap off that mark, and he duly delivered. But do you think you're not going to abandon him now for the Ballymore, surely?
No, definitely not. He would into this race have 143. He'd probably get £10 for it. So if he went to 153, where Hermes Allen I think is 149. So the handicapper has him ahead, and the English handicapper might even give him an extra couple of pounds just for luck. It was a good performance. He jumped reasonably straight through the race when Paul had cover, and he was at pains to make sure he had cover, something on his outside and something to keep him relaxed as much as possible. That will be an issue stepping up and trip over 2.5. Can he get him to switch off in behind horses? And he's also not taking on handicappers now, so they won't be jumping as quick and slick. That will be Paul's difficulty, but I think if he can do that, that's obviously a big help. But you could see when he took him wide and gave him room at the last, he did go right. So if he gets running, gets keen, gets too much light through the early part of the race, that jumping to the right will be exaggerated. So if he can get cover, park him down the inside, he's one with a big chance.
Okay, but all about tactics and race positioning. I love that. On we go to a quick mention for the bumper horses, Barry. A Dream to Share and Fun. Now 6-1 for the champion bumper at the festival, of course, and continues this excellent run of form for the Double Green and the Mullins team. That's been such a successful operation this season. And that's the mare that people seem to have really jumped onto and is now sort of second best in that market.
Yeah, she picked up and she sprinted away from a smart field. Really impressive. You couldn't be anything but impressed. But likewise, A Dream to Share, coming a different kind of route, one of us common bumper, under the radar. Thought it was a very smart performance. Brian Gleeson, who owns it, his son John rode it, and the great John Kiley trains it. And John knows how to get one ready for Cheltenham and for a bumper, so I wouldn't have definitely wouldn't lose any faith in John. But no, two really smart performances, and definitely I think they're worthy to be towards the head of the market.
And before we move away from you, Barry, but also Dublin Racing Festival reflections, we've touched upon Willie's comments in the press in regards to Paul Townend and the rides he's given those horses we've already talked about, but also he's come out with some pretty strong quotes in relation to the whip rules here in the UK. And I hate to sort of put a downer on this show and bring in the whip, but it is obviously high on everyone's agenda at the moment. What was the vibe like in Ireland this weekend, and Willie coming out with these comments which are kind of out of character from him? It's obviously a real concern for the Irish coming over to the Cheltenham Festival.
I think it's a concern for everyone, English and Irish, and you can obviously get that from the way room in England. But no, I was in Leopardstown Sunday with the Irish Jockeys Association. There was some officials from the BHA were over to explain the whip rules and where they are, and the potential for suspensions, totting up, everything. So no, it's not good news. Very, very severe. You know, the penalties that potentially could be handed out for tiny infringements. It's just way over the top, and it's going to be hard to take. It's yet all to be confirmed, obviously, but it's not looking great. And if it goes ahead how it's planned, I think there could be a shortage of jockeys for entry.
God, that really would be a depressing state of affairs. Fingers crossed something can be sorted as time ticks away, and I feel like it's sort of we're running out of time. But anyway, on we go. Just a quick mention, Tony. Jerry Kalam over in winning the Scilly Isles in Sandown on Saturday may have been sort of almost an under the radar performance, which is a funny thing to say about a graded effort, obviously. But given the action at Dublin, not many people focusing on this horse keeping his unbeaten record. He's now 3-1 for the Brown Advisory. What did you make of his performance in relation to all those other novice chasers we've touched upon in this category?
He only won by quite a narrow margin, but I thought it was still a taken performance, because that trip is on the sharp side for him, and he would like a little bit of softer ground. Now, he probably won't get the soft ground shot. We don't know what the weather forecast will be, but he will get the longer trip. The Brown Advisory would look the obvious race from. There was a moment now down the back where he started jumping on, and I said, oh, he's going to put up a dominant performance here. But then I think it was the fourth last he put down a bit. And then he had to deal with adversity. He kind of got outpaced by the quicker horses. But Jordan Gainford kept his head now. He never really went all out for him, and he got back to the lead coming to the last, and he was always winning from there. So it was a really good performance. I suppose going left-handed will be something new for him. He's never gone left-handed. I do think that is probably a little bit of an accent over obstacles anyway. He's never gone left-handed. Because he got ruled out after Torless last year for the season. Leopardstown's probably not going to be his track with the way the ground rides there. But yeah, I see him in a weakish year for that Brown Advisory. He would deserve to be near the head of the market, if not heading it outright.
Okay, to wrap up what happened where section, which has been the majority of the show, because we are coming to the end of the show now. One line from both of you. What was your most impressive performance of the week, Barry Geraghty?
Obviously Galopin Des Champs, but no, as I said, the race of the season, El Fabiolo, you'd have to be very excited by him.
Okay, El Fabiolo for you. Same question to you, Tony. What was your performance or moment or horse to take away from the weekend?
Yeah, same question, same answer. El Fabiolo as well here.
I think, Barry, you were actually meant to go with absolute notions there, but anyway, we'll just plough on.
We covered him earlier on. Vanessa. So I think finishing second to Goodland wasn't exactly performance of the weekend for me, but he's definitely one to take note of.
I see what you've done there. You blame the question rather than the answer. I like it. Look, guys, for all you viewers out there, don't forget to download the At The Races app. It's the best racing app around. Everyone agrees with that. You can get results on their race card, in-app betting, replays. You can watch Sky Sports Racing as much as you like. And obviously that's a top-class channel, so you want to be doing that. So download the At The Races app without further hesitation, please. Okay, on we go to the week ahead. And we're just going to fly through this because, of course, we've got Newbury and Warwick to look forward to. But Newbury, Barry, Betfair Hurdle will be as competitive as ever, but of course it might happen on pretty fast ground, which maybe it could be a concern for some. Just looking at the early entry stage, what's jumping out the page at you, not only in the Betfair Hurdle, but in some of the other races too?
Yeah, well, Filey Bay is favourite, and he's a worthy favourite, you'd imagine. He's creeping up nicely to the weights. Won on good ground in Doncaster. In 2 runs back, he won when Canton since. It was impressive both days. Monveal, a horse of Philip Hobbs, who was a winner in Ascot back in November, hasn't been seen since. I thought they were two that were on the up. It looks a very, very competitive race as always, but they're two who I think are just maybe the right side of the handicapper. As regards the other races, Grenadine is going to be very hard to beat in the game Spirit. And Hitman is down as favourite for the Denman chase, but I'm not always fully convinced on him. He won a weak race in Haydock. He pulled up when he burst in the King George. I would rather take a chance with Does He Know, who won a handicap in Cheltenham back in November. Second one back, having fallen at the first after a wind up, so I think he's of interest there.
Brilliant. Okay, well, a few tips there, a few interesting angles in. Don't forget also we get to see John Bon and Love Envoy at Warwick. Hopefully, well, they will go off at very short prices. Hopefully they'll get the job done. And John Bon will just tee up their clash with El Fabiolo beautifully for the Arkle come March. But for now, that about wraps up the show. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. Do hit subscribe, give us a like, give us a retweet, get in contact. We want to hear from you. But as always, thank you for watching. That was Off the Fence.